Hello, and welcome back to the Southern Bible Thumper channel. Today is Wednesday. Happy Valentine's Day. For this upload, we will be reading Leviticus chapter 13. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, When a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising, a scab, or a bright spot, and it be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought unto Aaron the priest, or unto one of his sons the priests. And the priest shall look on the plague in the skin of the flesh. And when the hair in the plague is turned white, and the plague in sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh, it is a plague of leprosy. And the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean. If the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh, and in sight be not deeper than the skin, and the hair thereof be not turned white, then the priest shall shut up him that hath the plague 7 days. And the priest shall look on him the seventh day, and behold, if the plague in his sight be at a stay, and the plague spread not in the skin, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days more. And the priest shall look on him again the seventh day, and behold, if the plague be somewhat dark, and the plague spread not in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is but a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab spread much abroad in the skin, after that he hath been seen of the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen of the priest again. And if the priest see that, behold, the scab spreadeth in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprosy. When the plague of leprosy is in a man, then he shall be brought unto the priest, and the priest shall see him, and, behold, if the rising be white in the skin, and it have turned the hair white, and there be a quick raw flush in the rising, it is an old leprosy in the skin of his flesh, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean, and shall not shut him up, for he is unclean. And if a leprosy break out abroad in the skin, and the leprosy cover all the skin of him that hath the plague, from his head even to his foot, wheresoever the priest looketh, then the priest shall consider, and, behold, if the leprosy have covered all his flesh, he shall pronounce him clean that hath the plague. It is all turned white. He is clean. But when the raw flesh appeareth in him, he shall be unclean. And the priest shall see the raw flesh, and pronounce him to be unclean, for the raw flesh is unclean. It is a leprosy. Or, if the raw flesh turn again, and be changed unto white, he shall come unto the priest. And the priest shall see him, and behold, if the plague be turned into white, then the priest shall pronounce him clean that hath the plague, he is clean. The flesh also, in which, even in the skin thereof, was a boil, and is healed. And in the place of the boil there be a white rising, or a bright spot, white and somewhat reddish, and it be shewed to the priest. And if, when the priest seeth it, behold, it be in sight lower than the skin, and the hair thereof be turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague of leprosy broken out of the boil. But if the priest look on it, and behold, there be no white hairs therein, and if it be not lower than the skin, but be somewhat dark, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days. And if it spread much abroad in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague. But if the bright spot stay in its place, and spread not, it is a burning boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Or if there be any flesh in the skin whereof there is a hot burning, and the quick flesh that burneth have a white spot, somewhat reddish or white, then the priest shall look upon it, and behold, if the hair in the bright spot be turned white, and it be in sight deeper than the skin, it is a leprosy broken out of the burning. Wherefore the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the plague of leprosy. But if the priest look on it, and behold, there be no white hair in the bright spot, and it be no lower than the other skin, but be somewhat dark, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days. And the priest shall look upon him the seventh day, and if it be spread much abroad in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the plague of leprosy. And if the bright spot stay in his place, and spread not in the skin, but it be somewhat dark, it is a rising of the burning, and the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is an inflammation of the burning. If a man or a woman have a plague upon the head or the beard, then the priest shall see the plague, and behold, if it be in sight deeper than the skin, and there be in it a yellow thin hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a dry scall, even a leprosy upon the head or beard. And if the priest look on the plague of the skull, and behold, it be not in sight deeper than the skin, and that there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall shut up him that hath the plague of the skull 7 days. And in the seventh day the priest shall look on the plague, and behold, if the skull spread not, and there be no yellow hair, and the skull be not in sight deeper than the skin, he shall be shaven, but the skull shall he not shave. And the priest shall shut up him that hath the skull 7 days more. And the seventh day the priest shall look on the skull, and behold, if the skull be not spread in the skin, nor be in sight deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the skull spread much in the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall look on him, and behold, if the skull be spread in the skin, the priest shall not seek for yellow hair, he is unclean. But if the skull be in his sight at a stay, and that there is a black hair grown up therein, the skull is healed, he is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. If a man also or a woman have in the skin of their flesh bright spots, even white bright spots, then the priest shall look, and behold, if the bright spots in the skin of their flesh be darker white, it is a freckled spot that groweth in the skin. He is clean. And the man whose hair is fallen off his head, he is bald, yet he is clean. And he that hath his hair fallen off from the part of his head towards his face, he is forehead bald, yet he is clean. And if there be in the bald head, or bald forehead, a white reddish sore, it is a leprosy sprung up in his bald head or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall look upon it, and behold, if the rising of the sore be white reddish in his bald head or in his bald forehead, as the leprosy appeareth in the skin of the flesh, he is a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him utterly unclean. His plague is in his head. And the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent, and his head bare, and he shall put a covering upon his upper lip, and shall cry, Unclean, unclean. All the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone. Without the camp shall his habitation be. The garment also that the plague of leprosy is in, whether it be a woolen garment or a linen garment, whether it be in the in the warp, in the warp or woof of linen or of woolen, whether in a skin or in anything made of skin, and if the plague be greenish or reddish in the garment or in the skin, either in the warp or in the woof or in anything of skin, it is a plague of leprosy, and shall be shewed unto the priest. And he shall look on the plague on the seventh day. If the plague be spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or in a skin, or in any work that is made of skin, the plague is a fretting leprosy. It is unclean. He shall therefore burn that garment, whether warp or woof, or woolen, or in linen, or anything of skin wherein the plague is, for it is a fretting leprosy. It shall be burnt in the fire. And if the priest shall look, and behold, the plague be not spread in the garment, either in the warp, or in the woof, or in anything of skin, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing wherein the plague is, and he shall shut it up 7 days more. And the priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed, and behold, if the plague have not changed his color, and the plague be not spread, it is unclean. Thou shalt burn it in the fire. It is fret inward, whether it be bare within or without. And if the priest look, and behold, the plague be somewhat dark after the washing of it, then he shall rend it out of the garment, or out of the skin, or out of the warp, or out of the woof. And if it appear still in the garment, either in the warp, or in the woof, or in any thing of skin, it is a spreading plague. Thou shalt burn that wherein the plague is with fire. And the garment, either warp or woof, or whatsoever thing of skin it be, which thou shalt wash, if the plague be departed from them, then it shall be washed the second time, and shall be clean. This is the law of the plague of leprosy, and a garment of woolen or linen, either in the warp or woof, or anything of skins, to pronounce it clean, or to pronounce it unclean. Summarizing Leviticus chapter 13. So, in this chapter, the priests are given an additional duty of medical examiner. God tells Moses that the Israelites must be brought to Aaron or one of his priests if the person suspects that they have leprosy. If the hair on the skin is white and the white spot goes deeper than the skin, it's leprosy. The priest must declare the person unclean. If the spot is white but not deep in the skin and the hair is white, the priest should shut the person up 7 days. If it hasn't spread on day 7, the person should be shut up 7 more days. If the spot is dark, this priest should declare it a scab and the person is clean. The person should be told to wash their clothes. In verse 8, the person is unclean if the scab spreads. This is leprosy. Verse 9, if a person with leprosy be brought to the priest with sensitive, raw, white skin, because that's what raw is meaning here, sensitive. If it's white skin and white hair, this is considered old leprosy. The person is unclean and should not be shut up. Verse 12, if a person's entire body has turned white from leprosy, he is clean. If the raw flesh presents itself, there's a change in skin from white to color, the person shall be considered unclean because this is evidence of the sickness, working and changing the condition of the skin. So if he's completely white and there's no more activity, that's considered clean because the virus is taking over the body. So now it's not a problem anymore. But if the skin turns from white to a rawish color or there's color and skin changes, the person would be considered unclean. Verse 16 through 17. If the skin turns raw and goes back to white, then the priest is considered clean. If a healed boil turns reddish white and the priest determines that there are no white hairs, no lower than the skin, but somewhat dark, the person is unclean. So these are several other conditions, and it's helping. These are instructions that are going to be given to the priest, and the priest is going to make the determination based on the instructions given. So there's one part that says the scall. If the scall isn't spreading and the regular hair color grows back in, scall is just referring to scalp disorder because it's on the scalp. And so that's what it's called. The presence of yellow hair definitely is a sign of that being leprous. When the regular hair color grows back, the disorder is healed. Verse 39 addresses how to determine eczema and to differentiate that between leprosy. Verse 40 through 41 addresses that baldness is not an illness. Verse 43 through 46. If a bald man gets leprosy on his bald head, he shall be determined to be utterly unclean by the priest. The person shall leave their head uncovered. They have to rip their clothes. They have to put on a covering on his upper lip and cry, "Unclean, unclean." He shall be quarantined in isolation until the sickness has persisted. And then verses 49 through 54 details if the sickness is in a garment. There are some conditions where if it's washed but the color doesn't change, it's unclean. If the color changes but spreads, it's also unclean. If it is considered unclean, then it should be burned. But if it's considered to be clean, then the place where the sickness was in the garment should be torn off and restored back to the owner. This is the law to pronounce garments clean and unclean. Highlights. Well, the first thing I would like to say is if there was sickness in a garment, like, why not just burn it? Because even if you tear it out, like, you're now going to have a hole in it. And if it's your jacket, like, you're still going to be cold, like, right on your shoulder. I guess it's better than having nothing, but, I think I would just sew another one, kill a bear, or, ask the priest for one of those offering skins. I'll make another one. Okay, so other highlights. In this chapter, priests are functioning as the first general practitioner. Midwives were mentioned in Exodus, so this chapter is the second mention of a medical practitioner. Priests have to now, in addition to all of their other duties, they have to now check for leprosy and monitor suspicious ailments or determine uncleanliness. Other things that priests are responsible for doing. Leviticus chapter 8, verse 35, and Leviticus chapter 10, verse 7, priests sometimes have to live in the tabernacle or stay there for an extended period of time. In those two verses, Leviticus 8:35 and Leviticus 10, verse 7, God commanded them not to leave. The tabernacle is considered a public place. It's open to all the Israelites. It's a high traffic area, and blood sacrifices are done there. So even though they have incense and stuff, there's constantly blood uh, there, which leads to the second responsibility that priests have. They have to slaughter sacrificial animals. This includes touching blood and cutting out body parts. Now, the argument can be made that they get paid in food, but food is not money. There's a loss of autonomy as a human. The provisions from their offerings may not accommodate the tastes. Let's say for an extended period of time, all the Israelites are bringing are lambs, and you'd like to have some fried pigeon or some fried turtle dove with wafers mingled with oil, and no one brings that in. Well, I'm sure you can request someone because in the book of Leviticus, when God was instructed them to bring items and resources to create the structure, they gave so much that Moses had to tell them to stop. So I'm sure they're generous enough. If he wanted a different meal, Aaron could ask. But, again, now you're having to sort of outsource the desire when if you just got paid money or if things were just a little easier, you could just do things yourself. Another thing that priests have to do, they have to wear a uniform. In Exodus chapter 39, the uniform that they're required to wear is intricate and it sounds beautiful, and it was made for glory and for beauty. But again, the priest had no input on what he was going to be wearing most of the time. Some of the features of his uniform: a bedazzled breastplate, an ephod, which is a holy apron. So bedazzled is a facetious word, but that's basically what it is. A breastplate with stones. They were precious, expensive stones, but that's what you have to wear. And you don't get to decide, like, I wanted to wear that, or I would like to have my input on what I want to wear. So he has to wear that. He also has to wear a sash. It's called a curious girdle in the Bible. And then in Exodus chapter 39, verse 24 through 25, the hems of the garment had pomegranates. And pomegranates were tiny cloth balls. And in between the tiny cloth balls, there were bells, so that every time the priest walked, there was that ringing sound. It's that Salvation Army. Every time you walk, they had to wear a bonnet. And the cherry on top, a medallion with the inscription on it, Holiness to the Lord. And they have to attach the medallion on their head at all times, wearing Holiness to the Lord on their head. So I just wanted to point out that all of that is required to be a priest. In addition to doing those things, now they have to be medical practitioners and shut people up and help people determine whether they have the illness or not. And so the way that Aaron got into this position, Moses was talking to God. God told him, hey, you're going to be the one to take your people out of Egypt. Moses said, I don't think I'm a good enough speaker. He kept doubting himself. God said, I'll bring Aaron, your brother, and you'll work with him. And now that they're here and they've left Egypt, Aaron has been appointed to be the priest. So what I would like to just point out is that it's very easy to criticize a religious leader. It's very easy to every single thing that they do, like pick it apart. And I'm guilty of it too, because it's fun to pick things apart. That's why we do it. But these are humans and they're trying to do the right thing. And it is unpleasant. Well, in my head, it seems like it would be unpleasant to be a preacher or a religious official because everything you do is scrutinized more than anyone else. And you are making a public declaration to do the right thing. Like, that's what's so crazy about it, because sometimes when I see other people, like especially rappers, I feel like rappers lie so much. DJ Academics is right. Like, some of these rappers lie so much. So much. And no one ever points them out. Nobody ever calls them out for being liars. But you have a pastor that really wants to do the right thing, but they're human. Maybe they didn't smile at you when you came to church, and so now you don't have a connection to God because God wouldn't act like that. I would, in my opinion, Christians and a lot of people fail to take their own spirituality seriously. They don't take responsibility for their own spirituality. You have to do a lot of work too to be considered part of a religion. You cannot just read Adam and Eve and get offended that Eve was the helpmeet when you didn't even take time to meditate on it and understand that she was created for Adam's solution. She was created to be Adam's solution. When you think about it like that, she adds more value. There's more value to her. But if you don't take the time to do that and you regurgitate a whole bunch of other people's ideas of the Bible and they didn't read the whole thing either, I mean, that's the same thing as if you know of a celebrity and you hate the celebrity based on the fans, you took no time to research that person's work or to listen to any of their interviews. Okay, because I keep getting a lot of recommendations for people who are talking so nastily against the Bible. I keep getting recommendations for it, and I really don't understand why, because I notice people don't have that same freedom to criticize Islam or Judaism, and we're all Abrahamic religions. So a lot of what they believe is what Christians believe. But See people disrespecting the Bible so much, disrespecting Jesus Christ so much. They wouldn't be that brave to do that with Allah and Islam. They would not be. I have never seen anybody disrespect Islam the way that they disrespect Christianity because they're not brave enough. Those people let you know they're serious about their stuff. It would be nice to see Christians on that same level, but you know what? I'm not even on that same level. I'm just now reading this. I've had my entire life to read it. So I can't criticize anyone else. I'm just pointing that out and voicing my frustration. Okay. So, the other thing, verses 42 through 47. This is a really harsh measure for leprous men with sickness on his head. If he's already bald, and the Bible had to tell you, like, hey, being bald, it's just they're clean, they're just bald. Like he had to mention it 2 different times: fully bald and receding. That means hair fall off the forehead, and the forehead, is getting more exposed. That's receding hairline. So if a person gets it in their head and they already have like baldness on their head, they must rip their clothes, cover the mouth, and alert everyone by saying clean, unclean, unclean, and quarantine until healed. This is just another example. Leviticus chapter 12, I doubled down because, I mean, to just be honest, reading that women have to make an atonement for childbirth was uncomfortable for me to read. But ultimately, the creator gets to write his own rules. The rules are not always fair. That's why it's really important to acquire information and to read and to absorb as much as you can, because the rules are fair. And they're not just not fair in one area. We, as people, we accept that a certain amount of wealth, a certain amount of influence absolves you from accountability. And we complain about it and we try to go extra moral. But usually the reason why morality is even thrown around in those situations is because if you can't compete, then you get moral. Because now, well, even if I had that type of money, I wouldn't do that. People do worse on a regular job, trying to act like you'd be extra moral if you had millions of dollars. No, you wouldn't. Okay. So thank you for watching this upload. That was Leviticus chapter 13, and the next upload will be Leviticus chapter 14.